Hello, everybody. My name is Michali Friedman. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I am taking over OK Clarity's Instagram. We're going to be doing tonight a Q&A where I get to answer a lot of your questions that you submitted. Right now we have 8 questions, and we have tops half an hour. So let's see how many questions we get through. Feel free to type your comments in the comment section. If you have questions, you can put that in the comment section. And with that, let's begin. Okay, so the first question is, where does SOOCD come from? I have OCD, but recently have been having these really unwanted thoughts. So for those of you who don't know, SO means sexual orientation. OCD is obsessive compulsive disorder. So the answer in terms of where OCD comes from, because really this is an OCD question, is it's a form of anxiety. It just happens to be more targeted to specific things. So it can be targeted to checking, right? Checking if the doors are locked, checking if there are germs on your hand. It can come down to a compulsive thought or intrusive thought about sexual orientation, right? So it's really the content or the subject of the OCD varies, but ultimately it's always going to follow the same patterns of intrusive thoughts, compulsions, that kind of thing. It's really, really hard when we have SOOCD because especially if we belong to a religious community, and especially if those thoughts or some of the actions that may follow go against our values, then it can be particularly painful, and also we may develop some sense of shame. I very much recommend going to a therapist who specializes in OCD, and they're going to know how to guide you when it comes to tackling the OCD. I think sometimes, ironically, the more you don't want to think about something, the more those intrusive thoughts pop up in our minds. And so particularly when it comes to sexuality, then you might try to be squashing that down if it conflicts with your values, the things that you're thinking about. And then chances are those thoughts are going to be coming right back up. So learning how to manage those and learning how to manage the compulsions, will be found in treatment with an OCD specialist. Okay, question number 2. How can I communicate to my husband that I want him to focus on, in caps, us, while we're on vacation? He's constantly distracted even after putting his phone on focus mode. I didn't know there was a focus mode. I don't want to come across nudgy, needy, or annoying. I just want to feel connected. First of all, I need to know how to put your phone in focus mode. But second of all, this can be really painful and really difficult because the way that you're defining connection might look very different than how your husband may define connection. Now, ultimately, I made a post a while ago that, I'm all for double standards. And what that means is that we and our partners may have different needs. And in this case, we may have different wants and needs when it comes to how we vacation and the kind of connection we're hoping to get. It's okay if it's different. The key is communicating about it. So I'm assuming that he puts his phone on focus mode because there has been some kind of conversation that you've had with him. I think it's okay to put it on the table and say, hey, look, I noticed that you're distracted. I'm totally not judging it. I just want to know if there's something on your mind. And also, here's what I'm hoping to get out of this vacation. And if he's continuing to get distracted, let's say in a conversation, then you can check in with him and say, look, I'm noticing that your mind is elsewhere. I asked you a question and there was kind of a silence. So can we talk about what's going on in your mind, and then maybe can we resume the conversation, right? So having these non-judgmental check-ins and also being very clear and articulate with what you're looking to get out of a vacation can really be an incredible proactive step to avoiding big fights on a vacation. And just by the way, a lot of people tend to have more escalation and disagreement in their marriages when they're on vacation, because there hasn't been a preemptive, proactive conversation ahead of time of what everyone wants to do and what they need. Now, sometimes people get organized and they think, okay, we're going to talk about what we want to do on a vacation. That is different than what we actually emotionally need on a vacation. So for example, I may love hanging out on the beach and my spouse may want to check out every museum in town. And I may hate museums and he may hate the beach, right? Those are, topics, those are ideas for things that we may want to do, and we have to navigate those differences. What I'm really talking about here is an emotional need, right? So some people, and this can come down to love languages. Some people may feel that they're getting their alone quality time with their spouses just by being together in the same room without even talking, because a lot of people don't get to see their spouses throughout the day. And other people are just like, no, I just need a nice romantic dinner at the end of the day. It's okay if we're not connecting so much during the day. And other people may want more focused time together and conversations and, kind of going deeper than they normally can. So everyone is different. There's no right or wrong. It's just what matters to you and what matters to your spouse and how you negotiate that. Okay, the next question is number 3. Is there any type of formula/lens to look at? When does it sound right to choose divorce? Say one has given a long shot at marital therapy. So this is a tough question. I think, kind of what I was saying earlier today on my live with Faye, I think that there are different ideas out there, and there's so many books written on the subject when it comes to how to get ourselves more clarity to make a decision about whether to stay in a marriage or not. That being said, there's no book out there or workbook out there that is custom made for your relationship, for your personality, for your spouse's personality. And that is really, really important, because only you ultimately are going to know in your head and in your heart, what the truth is and what's going on, what your truth is. I'm a big believer in that your head and your heart should be aligned when making a decision to get a divorce. And I think that, you mentioned that there was a lot of time spent in marriage therapy. I would have follow-up questions to that, like what was accomplished in the marital therapy? Did you feel like the therapist had a good rapport with both of you and understood the needs and the differences between the two of you? Or was the therapist choosing sides, which is a no-no, unless there's abuse? Did you feel like you had clear goals in the joint therapy and that some of those goals were accomplished, or did those goals continue to get derailed by, continuing disagreements and fights that came up week to week? So those would be some of my follow-up questions before I can best guide you. But if some of the answers to those questions is no, what I would recommend is either bringing these concerns up to the therapist or switching therapists and finding the right fit. I can't even tell you how many marriages could have been saved if not for the couples going to the right therapist. And someone is mentioning here, therapists are often a recipe for divorce. Unfortunately, I'm not going to disagree. That being said, it's important to know, what a healthy therapist is, what a well-trained therapist is. I believe Shia Hecht did a series on OK Clarity about this, of like what to look for in a therapist and more about the therapeutic relationship. But I think that if a therapist is telling you what to do, and then that is a red flag, and that would be a great opportunity to run and find a therapist that works better for you. But yeah, these are some of the questions I would look at. Obviously, this is just speculation. I'm making a ton of assumptions. I don't know the specifics. I do think, though, that when it comes to any kind of abuse, whether it's spiritual, financial, physical, emotional, sexual, then those are all grounds for divorce, no matter what. Okay, another divorce question coming up. If one chooses divorce, how do they strengthen themselves through their choice to divorce when on the surface, externally, there isn't any display of a clear-cut, definite reason to do so? For example, there is no physical abuse. So that is a really good question. I think if I'm understanding correctly, this person is saying, I am 100% choosing divorce. I made my decision. However, now that I know that that's the right decision for me, how do I strengthen my resolve to move forward with that? Because there are things like that are kind of messing with me, and I'm getting confused. There's a really, really great book. It's a Christian book. So there's some like Christian, quotes from the New Testament, but a lot of it is quotes from actually the Old Testament, aka the Torah. But it's a great workbook that really helps people work through some of the struggles, the emotional struggles that come from divorce. I've done extensive research on trying to find good workbooks for people who are getting divorced, just to deal with the emotions, especially post-divorce. And this was the only one that I found that really did a good job, in my humble opinion. This is not a divorce organizer. There are plenty of divorce organizers out there, but when it comes to just the emotions, I believe it's called Fresh Start. And you can find it on Amazon. But basically, I think that obviously I'm going to start off with knowing your why. So whenever you have self-doubt, having a very easy way of dialoguing with yourself and talking with yourself. Yes, I definitely encourage talking to yourself, so that you're very, very clear on your whys. That might require you journaling a little bit more, and really getting clear on the reasons that you decided to terminate your marriage. And then kind of coming up with like short phrases that you can say to take you from A to Z in your rationale for getting divorced when there is self-doubt. The other thing I just want to end with this question is that even if you're the one deciding to leave the marriage, there's still going to be grief. A lot of people think like if you're the one who says, I want a divorce, then there's no grief and like you're just super strong and also you don't feel any emotions, but that's not true. There's a lot of grief involved in ending a marriage. It's a loss. It's a death of a relationship, and it's okay. I'm just creating space for you to grieve, even if you're the one that's saying, I want out. Okay, I'm going to just take a sip of water because I'm talking a lot and I'm used to talking with people. Okay, the next question is it true that professionals for the most part, won't weigh in on the decision to divorce since it's such a big life choice? How do you make the decision alone? Yes, you have friends. Yes, Rabbi, but they wait to hear the final choice from you. I love this question. It is true. It's actually considered unethical, according to the Code of Ethics, to give advice to clients. And I know that a lot of people get very confused by that because it can feel like their therapists give them advice. Any advice that a true professional therapist gives has to be based on research and evidence-based practices. If it's advice given from the therapist's own personal life, then that is not the most ethical thing to do. On top of that, if a therapist tells a client what to do with a big life decision, that is also unethical. And there are many, many reasons for that. Number one, I think most importantly, it is actually really profound and healing and empowering for us to own our own life choices. And if a therapist takes that choice away, then they're basically taking the client's right to determine what's best for them in their own lives. And they're taking that choice away. Now, it's very possible that down the line, whether it's 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, that the client may have second thoughts about their choices, and then they may blame the people that told them what to do. It's so much more empowering to say, yes, I made this choice. I worked through the reasons why, kind of like we were talking about with the question before, and I'm clear on my choice, as opposed to having other people make our decisions for us. It's a sign of growth. It's a sign of healing. It's a sign of being an adult to make our own choices. Now, when it comes to the next part of the question, like, how do I make this decision alone? We're ultimately making the decision alone. However, It doesn't mean that throughout the whole process we are alone. And I think that is a really big difference. Throughout the whole process, we can go to support groups, we can have therapy, we can hang out with friends to distract ourselves, to decompress, to get their input. We can gather people's input and their thoughts. However, the choice should be ours. So for example, I may say to someone, what do you make of this situation? Not what do you think I should do, but what do you make of this situation? Or I need this and he needs that, and I'm not sure how to kind of merge the two together. What do you suggest? Right? So getting people's input about things, gathering information about, just reading, like, can I live with this? Can I not live with this? Is there hope? Is there, ways for repair, right? You can gather information, and in that way you are so not alone. And when you're feeling all the feels, you can rely on people to help you soothe yourself. But ultimately the choice is going to be yours alone. Just like any choice in life, right? Like where to go to school, or what you want to eat for dinner, or what color you want to paint your nails, right? Like any small choice or big choice, it is so healthy to make that for ourselves. And yeah, and if any of your friends or your rabbi or anyone tells you that you should get a divorce, then I would say to take everything else that they say with a grain of salt, because in my mind, and I know this is sounding like a very strong statement, it is arrogant to tell people what to do, because nobody is in anyone else's shoes, and no one's in your shoes other than you. And so there's an arrogance involved if I think I know best about what's good for you. Even if I'm your therapist and I know the ins and outs of your situation, I still don't know. I'm not with you every single second of every single day. I'm not in your heart. I'm not in your mind. I'm not in your soul. And so it would be arrogant of me to think that I have all of the information. Okay, next question. I'm dealing with anxiety. I think this is a typo, maybe from low self-esteem. How to be honest with your spouse and be open when you feel down or anxious. Example, I'm dealing with social anxiety. Someone made a simcha, but I had social anxiety and I didn't participate in the simcha, but my spouse thought that I went. Should I be open and tell her that I didn't go? So this is a really great question. And to me, there's two separate things going on that I would like to tease out. The first is the fact that there is low self-esteem and that there is this social anxiety. And I think it's amazing that you're aware of it and you have names for it so that there's, what you can do with those things. And I think getting yourself into therapy to deal with the social anxiety can be really, really wonderful for you. And also boost your self-confidence and sense of self, because you're not limiting yourself from these wonderful life experiences, such as this simcha. Now, the other thing that I'm hearing, and I want to kind of tease these things apart, is the fact that your spouse was under the impression that you went to the simcha, and you really didn't. And to this, I would say absolutely. That, again, I would say absolutely on the condition that you have a safe, emotionally safe relationship. But I would absolutely tell your spouse, because that is, first of all, a builder of intimacy. When you share your struggles and your humanity with another person. So that's, first of all, you're just going to strengthen your relationship and your emotional partnership that way. Second of all, I think it's important to not omit truth from our spouses. And so if you're kind of giving your wife the impression that you went somewhere and she has this impression, if she starts asking you questions, chances are, if we omitted the truth, then it kind of snowballs. Then we start to make up answers, right? Or if we feel caught, then we say, oh, I didn't go, and things kind of tumble out that way. So they're like kind of two alternatives. But the first alternative, where we're kind of put in this position where now we feel cornered and we need a lie, right? That's just going to hurt your marriage. And so that's not a route that would make sense to go down. With the other route, if you're kind of cornered and then you just kind of come out with it like, yeah, I didn't go, It's not coming from a place of strength and you offering the information, and then your spouse may feel still that you betrayed their trust by omitting the truth. So I would say your best bet is to be open and to tell her that you did not go, so that you have that strengthened emotional intimacy in your relationship, and you'll likely be able, if it's an emotionally safe relationship, you'll be able to get her support. And then the last thing, as I mentioned in the beginning of this question, is and the answer is to seek therapeutic support so that you feel better in your own skin. Social anxiety is really hard. A lot of people have it, and the fact that you did not go to the Simcha tells me that that's an avoidance, and that means that there is a very real fear. And so conquering that, looking at that, understanding that, and also being gentle and kind with yourself along the way, I think would be my recommendation. Okay. 2 more questions for tonight. My husband and I have not been intimate in over 3 years. Is my marriage over? I think it is. So this is a question that I've actually heard many, many times. Your marriage is not necessarily over. There are a lot of things that you can try, and there's a lot of hope to be had. However, that being said, you're going to have to roll up your sleeves and kind of get to work. I would highly recommend that you work with a sex therapist. I like to think of intimacy as like the glue of a relationship, whether it's sexual intimacy, emotional intimacy. I think that, a lot of times people ask me questions of like, what's a normal frequency? And I always answer like, there is no normal. That being said, if a couple has not been intimate in over a bunch of months, by their choice, and meaning it's not because of a medical issue, and certainly if they have not been intimate in a year or 2 or 3 or 10, then to me that's indicative of an issue in the marriage. It's the marriage needs intimacy in order for it to thrive. It's like kind of getting an IV drip, right? It's like you may not need it often, but your body can use those nutrients, and it's definitely benefiting your body. And then especially if your body does not have those nutrients, then you for sure need that infusion. And so I would say that learning in sex therapy, what are some of those blocks, and how to create or recreate an intimate life from scratch in a way that works for both of you is kind of the path forward. But I believe that there is hope, as long as both people are committed to doing the work. Okay, last question. Husband is a people pleaser. It affects our relationship negatively. Is there something I can do to help? So I would have follow-up questions like, how does this affect your relationship negatively? Like, is he just telling you what you want to hear? Is he only doing things that you want to do, but never telling you things that he wants to do? Is he not assertive about his needs, right? These are just like very common things that people pleasers tend to do. So I'm just going to go with some assumptions, but again, take it with a grain of salt because I don't know the specifics on how the people pleasing manifests in your relationship. I think that, you can definitely be supportive. I do think that this would also be the kind of thing that should be best addressed in therapy. There's also some wonderful groups out there like CODA, Codependence Anonymous. They do a good job with addressing people pleasing. They have a bunch of literature and books that you can also purchase. But oftentimes when we think about people pleasing, I look at it from a few different lenses, but one of it is like a boundary thing where they don't know proper relationship boundaries. And then the other piece is like attachment, where they've learned at some point in their lives that the way to attach to people in a way that feels safe for them is to give people what they want. And when you give people what they want, then the connection is maintained and it doesn't go away, and then they feel safe. And so it's important to understand people pleasing from that lens, because when we're asking them to not people please, we're actually asking them to do something that feels terrifying and threatening for them. They feel on a very deep level, even if they may not even be able to access this superficially, but on a deep level, they feel that if they say what they need or want, and then especially if it conflicts with what you need or want, that's going to rupture the relationship, and that can feel terrifying and devastating for them. So a couple of very easy tips that may work, may not work, depending on your situation, but I definitely recommend going to a therapist for this, is saying, before you say what you want, to say, hey, I'm curious what you want to eat for dinner. And if they say, well, what do you want to eat for dinner? And you say, I'm really not sure. Are you in the mood for meat or milk? Asking them questions that have choices, and having very few choices, like tops 3 choices, can feel less overwhelming. When it comes to deeper discussions of this is what I need from the relationship, I'm not getting it kind of thing, or what I like to see is this, there might need to be a lot of reassurance of hey, I'm fully committed to you. I love you. Nothing you say is going to make me go, ugh, that's it in this particular conversation. I really just honestly want to hear from you what you need. And it's okay if it's different than what I need, because we can work together to figure out something that works for everybody. So kind of speaking to their fear of rupturing the relationship, can help. But for more ideas and strategies, again, I think it would be helpful to go speak to a therapist. Anyway, that's a wrap for tonight, guys. For those of you who've been watching this whole time, kudos to you. It's been a long live. And thank you so much. And stay tuned for more lives. I'm going to be popping on, I believe, next week. But Faye at OK Clarity is going to be posting all of that. Have a lovely night.